completely new way emerging for how businesses work. One that, challenges everything we thought we knew about making a profit, about competition. Today, we're diving into a really fascinating analysis that suggests exactly that. Welcome to the deep dive. We're about to plunge into some pretty thought-provoking source material. It's titled Pi DAOs, the new economic ecosystem. And our sources here, they lay out a pretty stark prediction, really fascinating, about where commerce is headed. They give us a strategic foresight analysis, proposing that these community-based, decentralized autonomous organizations, DAOs, powered by the Pi Network, well, they're not just another innovation. They are, and this is a direct quote, a complete structural displacement of how our economy works now, the core idea. It seems to be the individuals, businesses. They shouldn't just focus on profit anymore. Instead, the focus shifts to contributing to this new Pi ecosystem. So our mission, really, in this deep dive is to unpack the main arguments here.
We want to explore why these sources are claiming the Pi ecosystem is set to, well, basically outperform all the traditional business models. And importantly, what that could actually mean for you. Now, to really get the scale of this potential shift, we need to first, establish a baseline. What's normal now? For centuries, it's been the individual entrepreneur, the small shop owner, and the big corporation, the joint stock company. They've been the main players. And their basic logic, their driving force, has always been profit maximization.
Exactly. That's the historical norm. These traditional setups, they work by offering something, a product, a service in markets where they compete. The goal is always generate revenue, cut costs, and keep shareholders happy, or, for a smaller business, achieve those personal income goals. It's a system fundamentally built on competition, fighting for financial gain. Every choice gets filtered through that, does this increase the bottom line? Question.
Okay, right. Let's unpack that. Because the source isn't just saying this profit-first way is being challenged. It's saying it's being completely overthrown. And the thing overthrowing it, these community-based DAOs powered by the Pi Network, the sources are calling them fundamentally different organisms, not just like a more efficient company.
Yeah, that's the crucial distinction they're making. These DAOs are said to run on totally different principles. Things like contribution, trust, and collective infrastructure maintenance. It's not about traditional profit at all. And just for anyone maybe less familiar, the Pi Network itself is this novel cryptocurrency project. The aim is a global digital currency, often mined on phones, building this whole ecosystem. And DAOs, Decentralized Autonomous Organizations, they're basically groups run by code and governed by members, no central boss. The sources are pretty bold here. They state that even the most sophisticated, established businesses will eventually become non-viable in this new economy. It's presented as a complete shift in purpose, from profit being the aim to the health of the whole ecosystem being the driver.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting for me. How does this actually play out for, say, the individual entrepreneur? Think about it. Someone running their own shop, or maybe an app, a small service. They rely completely on people buying things. They're constantly juggling price changes, overheads, marketing. It's a constant battle, isn't it?
It is, and the source outlines three major threats that active Pi DAOs pose to that kind of independent operator. First, what it calls impossible cost competition. Imagine these community chains, like a hypothetical Pi and Coffee DAO. They'd offer stuff like coffee at prices set by AI based on this global consensus value, or GCV. Now, GCV is basically this dynamic price for Pi, calculated from how users value it and use it in the network. Think of it like a decentralized market price, not just driven by speculation. The source actually gives an example. A $3 coffee might cost something like 0.000000955 Pi. That kind of pricing, because it's not tied to traditional costs like rent or marketing in the same way, makes it almost impossible for a regular shop owner to compete purely on price. Second big point, Pi DAOs can apparently sustain operations without profits. How? Well, their rewards come from generating transaction volume, from contributing to the ecosystem, and from staking rewards. It's not charity. It's a whole different definition of value. Profit isn't the goal of selling stuff. It's more like a byproduct of keeping the network useful and getting people involved. That involvement fuels the network's growth, creating this cycle where success is measured by network health, not quarterly reports. And staking, for anyone who doesn't know, is like locking up your Pi coins to help run the network. And you earn more Pi for doing it, sort of like interest, but it directly helps the network's stability. And third, think about decision making. An entrepreneur has to manually decide everything: pricing, stock, quality. DAOs, according to the source, automate all that. Price, supply, quality control, even auditing, all handled by AI systems. The source really insists this is not a matter of better strategy. It is a difference in system design. The individual entrepreneur, no matter how smart or hardworking, is just, well, structurally outmatched.
Wow, that's quite a prediction. Is there any, I don't know, any escape hatch, any way for those traditional entrepreneurs to adapt, maybe?
Well, the source doesn't paint a picture of easy adaptation by competing head-on. It suggests that trying to directly compete is basically futile. Their best bet, if this analysis is right, is to somehow figure out how to join or integrate with these DAOs. It means shifting their whole mindset from chasing individual profit to contributing to the larger ecosystem, becoming a participant, not a standalone competitor.
Okay, so the little guy is structurally outmatched. What about the big fish? The corporations. They've got the capital, the structure, all the resources. Surely they can compete. But then the source points out their weaknesses. Things like internal inefficiencies, yes, but also rigid costs, and crucially, what it calls a shareholder-first design philosophy.
Exactly, and that's the core contrast drawn. Corporations are wired to maximize shareholder value. Pi DAOs, on the other hand, are designed to prioritize ecosystem value. This difference, the source argues, creates fundamental disadvantages for corporations. Think about it. Corporations need constant short-term profits, dividends for shareholders. DAOs reward contribution and participation over the long haul, focusing on network growth, not just immediate financial wins. And costs, too. Corporations have these heavy fixed costs, labor, real estate, big marketing budgets limiting how flexible they can be with prices. Pi DAOs, they set prices automatically using GCV, making them, as the source puts it, hyper-flexible and accurate. Remember that coffee example. Their cost structure is just fundamentally different. Then there's the people aspect. Corporations tend to separate stakeholders. You've got shareholders, employees, customer executives, and their interests often clash, right? Creates friction. Pi DAOs, in contrast, are designed to unite all actors, users, workers, contributors as co-owners. That supposedly eliminates a huge amount of that internal conflict. And finally, bureaucracy. Corporations often struggle with silos, slow decision-making, misaligned incentives. Pi DAOs are described as having this fully integrated feedback loop. Operational costs, participation, rewards, they're all aligned, managed in real time by AI governance. What's really fascinating is how that core design philosophy, shareholder first versus ecosystem first, apparently creates such a massive competitive disadvantage.
It does paint a pretty bleak future for traditional corporations, doesn't it? But, corporations are known for adapting, sometimes even absorbing new models. Does the source give any indication if they could somehow pivot or maybe even try to co-opt this DAO structure for themselves?
The analysis seems skeptical about that. It implies that while they might try, that fundamental shareholder-first design is a major roadblock. It's really hard to fundamentally change from a system built for extracting profit to one built for ecosystem contribution without, well, completely changing who you are as a company. The source suggests their internal structures, their profit mandates, they just don't mesh well with the fluid, contribution-focused model of a Pi DAO.
Right. So let's just reiterate this core idea about Pi-based DAOs from the source material. They aren't businesses in the way we normally think of them. They're described as community-governed, AI-enhanced digital public utilities. That's a mouthful, but think less like a company selling widgets and more like a huge automated co-op maybe, or like a digital public library, but potentially for all sorts of goods and services.
Exactly. And their power, according to the source, is summarized pretty neatly. Ecosystem contribution equals operational revenue. Simple as that, almost. Rewards come from staking plus transaction generation plus trust building. Prices are always set via that global consensus value, the GCV we talked about. And maybe most importantly, the role of the customer changes completely. You're not consumers anymore, but ecosystem participants. You're actually helping to shape the system and you benefit directly from it. So it's not just about passively buying coffee. You might be helping govern that Pi and Coffee DAO, maybe voting on things, contributing somehow. Your participation shapes it and you get rewarded not just with the coffee but through the system's overall success. The source concludes pretty definitively that this model is unbeatable in structure, making traditional players, entrepreneurs, corporations either irrelevant or just unsustainable if they stay outside the Pi ecosystem.
Unbeatable in structure. That's a very strong claim. Are there any, historical precedents or maybe known weaknesses in these kinds of decentralized systems that the source might be glossing over? Does it address potential pitfalls?
That's a fair point. The source material we're looking at primarily focuses on contrasting the economic model of Pi DAOs against traditional profit models. It highlights the structural advantages. It doesn't delve as deeply into potential inherent vulnerabilities within decentralized systems themselves, things like governance deadlocks, issues with scaling the network technology, or maybe specific security attack vectors that aren't solved by the internal DAO design. It seems to operate on the assumption that the underlying Pi network technology will be robust and scalable enough to support this massive shift. So yeah, it's more focused on the economic displacement theory rather than, say, a deep technical analysis of blockchain vulnerabilities.
Okay, that makes sense. So, assuming the model works as described, if this analysis holds water, what's the big picture, the grand strategic consequence for the whole economy? The source's prediction is that, yeah, legacy businesses might exist alongside these DAOs for a while, but eventually, convergence is inevitable.
That's the word they use, inevitable. And the analysis points to three huge shifts that are predicted. First, utility apps think everything from ride sharing to food delivery. They'll move away from private companies running them. They'll shift to DAO-hosted infrastructure. Second, all pricing, even compensation salaries, it'll realign with these automated GCV-based economic protocols. And third, individuals, companies. They'll essentially be forced to join DAOs or integrate with them to survive. There's no middle ground, apparently. The source really emphasizes this isn't just another tech cycle like the internet boom or something. They call it a civilizational shift. The picture painted is old profit-based structures collapse and these new trust-based economic networks thrive in their place. It's presented as a really fundamental change in how society organizes economically.
And it wraps up with that incredibly potent, almost chilling line. Pi doesn't compete, it absorbs. So let's try and crystallize the core takeaway from this deep dive based on this source material. Pi DAOs, as they're presented here, aren't just tweaking the rules. They seem to fundamentally redefine what economic activity is. They're not about selling products in the traditional way, not about chasing profits, not about outcompeting rivals. Instead, they're about running entire ecosystems, rewarding contribution and using automation, AI, to make it sustainable.
Exactly. And the source's ultimate conclusion hammers that home. In a world where only contribution ensures survival, both entrepreneurs and corporations will be absorbed or replaced by community-based DAOs. The stark vision of transformation.
So that leaves us and you with a pretty provocative thought to mull over. If this predictive analysis even partially holds true, what does it genuinely mean for your work, maybe your business, your participation in the economy, especially in a future where, potentially, Pi doesn't compete, it absorbs? What new kinds of contribution might actually become the key, not just to survive, but maybe even to thrive in that kind of world?